Well, good morning, Epic Church. All right, every time I hear that intro, I think like Spider-Man's gonna come out the back door because it's so epic. I love it. But it's such a privilege to be here this morning. Thank you, Lindsay, for that amazing intro. And it's such a blessing to be serving under your leadership here at Epic and seeing how you're following every step that God is leading you towards. I love to be a part of this community. It's such a privilege. If you're wondering who I am, I don't look like Ben. I don't look like Will. My name is Anthony, as Lindsay introed me. I'm one of the student directors here at Epic Church. And the other student director, the better half, is Krista, my wife right there. We've been leading here at Epic it's going to be 3 years this year, and it's been amazing to see these students grow in their spiritual walk and to see how God's transforming us through these years. When I say the word prayer, what comes to mind? Maybe you think of a holy and sacred place that only the elite and the very religious go. Maybe it's a kneeling, or you're in the right posture, maybe on the ground or with your hands in the air. Maybe when you hear the word, you get nervous or you get intimidated. I know that was how it was for me when I first came to know Jesus, even to this day. I remember one holiday season, it was when I first started to know who Jesus was and I got saved. And every year, our family hosts holidays at our house. And we have so many people over. We invite like all our family. We don't have a big house. It's very small, but everybody comes over. It's a great time. But each year, my dad does the blessing and the prayer over the food. It was just like, it's just what he did. We go to anybody else's house. It's like, hey, my dad's name is Roland. He's like, hey, Roland, can you pray? Can you do the blessing? Every time he would do it, right? But this year was a little different. My mom asked my dad, hey, Roland, are you going to do the blessing this year? And he's like, no, Anthony's going to do it. What? Seriously? Hold up. I was like, I can't be doing this. I get so nervous. And it was very significant for him to say that. It's such a privilege and an honor to do the blessing. That's just how it was in our family. And so the day of the dinner, I'm just like, I'm so focused on the prayer. That's all I can think about. Like, even when the family's over, I'm just thinking about, okay, what am I going to say? I'm so nervous. I'm not even paying attention to my cousins. They're just doing whatever. And I'm going online. I'm looking at example prayers, and I'm, like, writing down prayers. And I got the perfect prayer written out. I'm like, okay, this is good. This sounds good, right? I loved it. It was perfect. And so it's time to pray, right? I'm like, all right, I'm ready. And so I get my paper out. But there's no paper, right? There was no paper. I did not have the paper on me. And I just start sweating. I start getting nervous. It was bad, y'all. I'm going to tell you, it was really bad. And, I mean, it sounds goofy, but I didn't want to mess up. I didn't want to say the wrong thing. And sometimes praying can be tough. Like, prayer always seemed like a hard spiritual discipline for me. I don't know about you guys, but it's tough sometimes. I mean, we want to pray well. We want to sound good when we're praying. We want to hear some like, and oh, yes, Jesus, and some amens, right? We do that. I know I want to hear some of those. We want to sound good. And we can feel as if we don't pray the right way, or we don't say the right things, or use an acronym that's known to be helpful, that God isn't hearing our prayers, that it's not as effective. But God showed me something that was very helpful that holiday. So when it was time for me to pray, I just took a deep breath, and I just started praying ugly. I'm telling y'all, it was ugly. And what I mean by that is I prayed from the heart. I thought about my family. I thought about what I was thankful for, how much of a blessing it was to have everybody together and just share this meal with them. I prayed straight from the heart. Again, it was not pretty. It didn't sound good. It wasn't eloquent, but I prayed from the heart. But what if God cares more about our ugliness than our excellence? That's not saying go out and do ugly stuff that is ugly in God's sight. No, I'm talking about prayer. So we're going to jump into some text. That's why we're here today, to learn about what Jesus says. So let's open the Bibles up. So we're going to go to Matthew chapter 6, verse 5 through 9. And please stand as we read God's word. So this is during Jesus, the Sermon on the Mount, kind of his most widely known talks and sayings, and a lot of his juicy stuff is in these passages. So we're going to start in verse 9, Matthew 6, verse 5 through 9. So verse 5. And when you pray, do not be like the hypocrites, for they love to pray standing in the synagogues and on the street corners to be seen by others. Truly, I tell you, they have received their reward in full. But when you pray, go into your room, close the door, and pray to your Father who is unseen. Then your Father who sees what is done in secret will reward you. And when you pray, do not keep on babbling like the pagans, for they think they will be heard because of their many words. Do not be like them, for your Father knows what you need before you ask him. This, then, is how you should pray. Please take a seat as we dive into this. So I kept coming back to this first chunk of text right before he gets into the Lord's Prayer, another widely known passage on prayer. And I noticed it was an issue of the heart. Jesus goes on to say, do not be like the hypocrites, for they love to pray standing in the synagogues and on the street corners to be seen by others. Truly, I tell you, they have received their reward in full. And so the hypocrites he's talking about here, it consisted of Pharisees, the religious elites, the religious leaders. And praying was a performance to them. They were looking to be seen by others, looking to impress other people and to get applause from other people. And to be honest, we love to impress people sometimes, right? Not even sometimes, all the time, right? We love to be seen by others and show people that we're doing a good job, that we're smart, that we can perform well and do the right thing. And we live in a culture that respects that, right? Elevated on different platforms and social media and influence, it's because people perform well and they do their job well. But Jesus is saying, hold up. The reward that they get for praying this way is to be seen by others. That's it. That's all they get. They don't get the fruitfulness of prayer because their hearts are not in the right place. If you pray to impress, that's all you're going to get. You won't experience true prayer. Impressing others doesn't draw us closer to God. Expressing our heart to him does. And here's a quote from Tyler Staton. He's a pastor out in Portland, Oregon. He's a great author, too, as well. He says, God is looking for relationship, not well-prepared speeches spoken from the perfect motives. I love that. It's so good. And Jesus goes on to say, do not keep on babbling like the pagans, for they think they will be heard because of their many words. Do not be like them, for your Father knows what you need before you ask him. Babbling prayers happens when you just start repeating the same things over and over to God. And you're not relating your words relationally. You're not connecting with him with your heart. And imagine you're, walking around your house and you have kids or maybe a spouse or a family member and you're just saying, oh, I love you, I love you, I love you over and over again. I love you, I love you, I love you. It's like, all right, we get it. It starts to lose its weight. It starts to lose its significance. God's not interested in hearing our hollow words or a thesaurus of amazing words that we can come up with just to make us sound righteous. Here's an amazing quote by Rich Villodas. He says, it's a sharing of hearts more than offering words. It's not about the many words or even the lack of the words that we use, but it's about the intentions of our heart. These people honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. They worship me in vain. That's in Matthew 15, 8 through 9. So we can come to God and say all these things, but if our hearts are not directed towards him, our hearts are going to be far from him. And I think of the parable of the Pharisee and the tax collector. If you guys don't know, Jesus kind of paints this amazing picture of the Pharisee and the tax collector coming to the temple to pray. And we have the Pharisee, the religious leader, he's coming in, kind of puffing himself up and feeling very prideful and saying, I'm doing all these religious things that I need to do, checking off everything on this checklist. Yes, I pray, I fast, I tithe. I'm not like these other people who don't come to church or who are acting up, right? I'm not like these other people. But then we have the tax collector. It says he would not even look up to heaven, but beat his breast and said, God, have mercy on me, a sinner. This man went home more justified than the Pharisee. How could that be? I thought the Pharisee was doing what he's supposed to do. I thought he's reading his Bible, right? In that time, the Torah. I'm praying, I'm fasting, I'm tithing, everything he's supposed to do. How can this tax collector go home more justified. The tax collector came with all of his mess. He came with his sins. He came with his feelings about how he's probably wronging people out of their money, probably how he's looked down in society. He brought who he is in humility and vulnerability. He came with his ugliness. And such a simple prayer from the heart is shown from the tax collector here. So how can we pray from the heart? Here's what I've learned personally, and hopefully it's a help to you guys, but just through my walk with Jesus, this is what I've learned. Number one, start simple. Think about a child, right? Children are very simple in their approach. They don't really talk about too many complex things or get too detailed with stuff. They're straight to the point, and they'll tell you how stuff is. That's just how children, that's what they do. And Jesus says in Mark 10:14, "Let the little children come to me, and do not hinder them, for the kingdom of God belongs to such as these." Sometimes we get so caught up in saying the right words and saying the right things, and again, using acronyms that are known to work. We become more focused on the prayer than we are talking to God. We become so keyed into, I have to say this right thing, and then we're just forgetting completely about God. If you focus more on being in his presence and sharing your heart with him, rather than saying the right things, how would your prayer life change? And when we talk to him, we can talk to him about our worries, what's on our mind at the moment right there. If you're happy, if you're thankful, if you're stressed, if you're anxious, if you're depressed, talk to him about those things. And when we do that, we're able to address those distractions and then focus completely on God. I know for me, I think about a lot of stuff throughout the day. I don't know about you guys, but there's a lot of different things that pop into my mind. I need to address those, and then I'm coming to God without thinking about those. There's an amazing quote from Paul Miller in A Praying Life. If you guys have not gotten this book yet, I highly recommend it. It's on one of the resources in the Epic app too, so please check it out. But he says, "The only way to come to God is by taking off your spiritual mask. Instead of being frozen by your thoughts and worries, talk with God about them. Tell him where you are at. Come simple in your approach as a child comes to a father." And speaking of children, kids have no chill sometimes, to be honest, right? They have no problem being completely honest, and they'll say something, and they don't mean to hurt your feelings, but it's like, bro, you had to say that? Well, you get kind of offended. Just gonna roast me right here in front of everybody? But that's just what they do. They're honest, right? That takes me to my next point, is be honest. The way I look at it is, as student leaders, one of our deep desires is to hear from students, to hear what they're dealing with. I hope some of the students that are here right now aren't cringing. But we want to hear what they're dealing with. We want to hear the problems of their heart, their struggles, their fears, their insecurities, their worries. And it's not easy, let me tell you. It's really not easy. For some of you with kids, how easy is it to talk to your kid about what they're dealing with? It's not easy. But we desire that every time we see these students, every single time we meet. We want to know what's on their hearts. And why is that? It's not to shame. It's not to judge them. It's not to condemn them. It's our desire to draw closer to them, to build this relationship, to show them the love of Jesus, to guide them in his way. In the same way that we desire this relationship with our students, what makes me think that God isn't desiring the same thing with me? Here's another quote from Paul Miller, Praying Life. It's just so good. You have to check it out. In bringing your real self to Jesus, you give him the opportunity to work on the real you, and you will slowly change. And I think of Hannah in the Bible. Hannah made a heartfelt, honest prayer. She was unable to have a child for years and years. And to make matters worse, her husband's other wife, yeah, that's a little weird. Her husband's other wife was insulting her year after year, every time about her not being able to conceive. And so you can think about the amount of anguish and distress that she'd be in every day, every second, every year, constantly thinking about that. It says in 1 Samuel chapter 1, verse 10, "In her deep anguish, Hannah prayed to the Lord, weeping bitterly." Deep anguish, excruciating pain that's hard to bear. She's crying from her heart. She's praying ugly. And the Message translation says that she was crushed in soul. In verse 13, it says Hannah was praying in her heart, and her lips were moving, but her voice was not heard. And a priest from the temple she was at saw her and said, "How long are you going to remain drunk?" She says, "Not so, my Lord. I am a woman who is deeply troubled. I have not been drinking wine or beer. I was pouring out my soul to the Lord. Do not take your servant for a wicked woman. I have been praying here out of my great anguish and grief." Did you guys notice that? That she's praying without even saying anything. Her lips are moving, but nothing is coming out. Her grief is so heavy and so deep, she does not even have the words to say it. And have you been there before? These last years have been kind of crazy with a lot of different stuff going on. I know some of our hearts are grieved, and we don't even know what to say, and we're confused and angry. And I know many of you may be dealing with not being able to have a kid or a child and thinking about this, and it's grieving your soul. And maybe you have depression or mental health that you don't know what to deal with or do with. I want to let you know that God hears you. God's with you in your pain. He's not somewhere high above. He's next to you in the pain. He dealt with that pain. He can be with you during this time. So please know that He loves you and He cares for you and He will give you comfort even when it feels like there's no way out. And God heard her cries from the heart and granted her request, and she gave birth to Samuel. She prayed ugly, and she kept on praying, it says in verse 12. My next point is stay consistent. Now, praying ugly or praying from the heart does not mean we just disregard making patterns and making time for prayer. Thinking that only emotional and responsive prayers are most effective. We have to be consistent. We have to create time for it. So it's the new year. How many of you guys started a plan? It doesn't have to be diet or workout plan, but how many of you guys started a new plan and when you felt like it, you just did it and yielded the results that you wanted to happen? Raise your hand. Oh, I got one over there. Oh, there you go. Okay. All right, I see you. Yeah, but not many of us. You got it, though. But to be honest, we may never feel like doing this stuff, right? Unless we create a consistent plan. And we see Jesus creating patterns of prayer. He prayed in the morning. He went away to pray by himself. He prayed in public. He prayed before a meal. He prayed before he heals. There's so many examples in Scripture of when Jesus prayed. And that pattern may look different for you. Our relationship with God is personal, so we can create a time that's personal to us. So often we can get into this mindset if we don't have time in the morning, 30 minutes to carve out, and prayer looks this type of way, and I do these things and I receive this feeling, then I have failed. I'm not praying the right way. A well-known priest in the 1900s said, "Pray as you can, not as you can't." Pray with the time you have. Pray with what you have, the space you have. Pray with what you have. Pray as you can. My prayer time looks a little different. In the morning, I say a short prayer, just thankful to God that I have another day, more breath in my lungs that he's given me. But at night, I say a longer prayer. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that happens throughout the day. I need to express that to God and just give him my worries. And if you know me, you know I'm a night owl. I am up when everybody else is asleep pretty much. So it's helpful for me to carve that time out before I go to bed. And maybe you're a first-time parent. Maybe you're between changing diapers or taking kids to school or making lunches or doing these things for the kids, and it's hard to find time to pray. So maybe you can pray short little prayers throughout the day. In between changing those diapers, in between cleaning up, you can say prayers as you're moving along with your day. Or maybe you work all day. You work a 9 to 5, and you literally have no time except for lunch, right? We can take that hour lunch or half an hour, whatever you got. I don't even know what you guys get, but you can take 10 minutes out of that lunch and direct your thoughts towards God and pray. Maybe you don't like being still. Maybe you don't like sitting like this and very calm and praying this way. That's okay. You can be active with your prayer. You can walk, you can jog, go outside. It doesn't have to look one type of way. I think sometimes we get into, religious mode and we want prayer to look a certain way because somebody else is doing it. but we're all different people. Look at these beautiful faces out here. We're all different. And prayer can look different for each of one of us. So find a way that works for you and stick with it. Amazing quote by Eugene Peterson. Spontaneities offer one kind of pleasure and taste of sanctity. Repetitions another. Equally pleasurable and holy. We don't have to choose between them. We must not choose between them. There are polarities of prayer. When we begin to see prayer as a heart-to-heart with God, we'll start growing in our relationship. Our hearts will start to change. We'll start seeing other people change. When we start praying ugly, praying from our heart, we're bringing who we are to God. We're bringing our messy selves. We're bringing our sinful selves, our hateful selves sometimes, to be honest. That's how we are sometimes. We start to pray passionately about what grieves our hearts, what grieves our souls, what worries we have, what we want to see change in the world, what we want to see change in the city, in this San Francisco city. We're no longer afraid to pray. We come to God because he's our Father and we are his child. When I prayed for my uncle to be healed from acute leukemia, I wasn't thinking of the right words to say. I didn't care. I just wanted to see my uncle be healed. And when we held his funeral service last year, I prayed about how I felt. Now I didn't understand what happened. Oh, man, I'm crying ugly. I brought my grief and my pain to that pulpit during his funeral service in front of all my family and my uncle's friends. And I just prayed ugly. I prayed from the heart. And afterwards, this guy came up to me, and he was like, he's kind of a bigger dude, tattoos, kind of rough around the edges. And he came up to me, and he said he worked with my uncle every single day. And he just started talking about, he said, I'm not a religious person, but your prayer really touched my heart. I almost didn't know what to say. I wasn't looking for that admiration. I wasn't looking for applause from other people. This wasn't about how good I prayed or how I didn't pray, but that prayer that I did, it touched his heart. And God showed me again how praying ugly and praying from the heart brings us closer to him. When we engage our hearts in prayer, he begins to transform us. He begins to transform other people just like he did with that guy he worked with. And that's what's so fascinating about Jesus. Man, there's so many great things, but his focus is on love and relationship, not rules and religion. Sometimes we want to do everything just to get closer to God, all the right things, all the, the prayers and the every right messages and all this stuff. But he's more focused on you. He's focused on your heart. He's focused on your relationship with him and the love that he has for you. He wants you. And this weekend is the remembrance of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., one of my favorite civil rights leaders in social and nonviolent social justice and the progress towards racial equality. And what he did for the African American people and for all people, for that matter, I can't even put words to it. And we mostly know him for his powerful words and the actions and leading campaigns and nonviolent organized protests against poverty and conflict and racial injustice. However, we may overlook that for him, prayer was a wellspring of strength and inspiration during the civil rights movement, as Coretta Scott King puts it. And so I bought this book. It's called Standing in the Need of Prayer. It's a celebration of Black prayer and African-American spirituals. It's a great book. But there's an excerpt in the beginning that Coretta Scott King talks about when she saw Martin Luther King praying. I'm going to read some of that, so stick with me. She says, "For my husband, Martin Luther King Jr., prayer was a daily source of courage and strength that gave him the ability to carry on in even the darkest hours of our struggle. I remember one very difficult day when he came home bone weary from the stress that came with his leadership of the Montgomery bus boycott. In the middle of the night, he was awakened by a threatening and abusive phone call, one of many we received throughout the movement. On this particular occasion, however, Martin had enough. After the call, he got up from bed and made himself some coffee. He began to worry about his family, and all the burdens that came with our movement weighed heavily on his soul. With his head in his hands, Martin bowed over the kitchen table and prayed to God. Lord, I'm taking a stand for what I believe is right. The people are looking to me for leadership, and if I stand before them without strength and courage, they will falter. I'm at the end of my powers. I have nothing left. I've come to the point where I can't face it alone. Later, he told me, at that moment, I experienced the presence of the divine as I have never experienced him before. She goes on to say, I believe that this prayer was a critical turning point for the African American freedom struggle, because from that point forward, we had a leader who was divinely inspired and could not be turned back by threats or any form of violence. This kind of courage and conviction is truly contagious. That blows me away every time I see that. To see how that prayer turned the tides, to see how that prayer was contagious. And I'm reminded of Jesus before he's crucified. He's in the garden praying. His soul is grieved and overwhelmed. He's asking, Father, everything is possible for you. Take this cup from me. Yet not what I will, but you will. Both of them, Martin Luther King, Jesus right here, they're both praying ugly. They're praying from their hearts out of vulnerability, out of weakness. They know they can't do it alone. They need the power of God. They need the Spirit. And what Ben said last week comes to mind. It's amazing. He said, I wonder what all I forfeited by trying to do something in my own strength rather than asking God to help me. What if the future of our church is mostly determined by what we ask of God? And I would go on to say, what if the future of our church and our city and our families and our neighbors are not only determined by what we ask of God, but how we ask of God? We can come to the Lord praying ugly, engaging our hearts, not just our minds. Sometimes Christianity becomes such a mind game, right? And it's so theoretical and logically thinking, but we don't engage our hearts. But if we come engaging our hearts, we start to change. You'll begin to see God in a more personal way. You'll see God as a compassionate person, that he cares about you. He wants to comfort you. He's longing intimacy with all of us. He wants to lift your burdens and reveal more of himself to you. He gives strength to the weak. He increases the power of the weak. When you don't know what to do and decisions you don't know how to make and you feel like you can't go on, he will lift you when you're grieving. He is compassionate. He's inviting all of you guys to go deeper in intimacy with him. I know there might be some barriers coming to God in prayer and just deepening your relationship with God. But the veil has been torn down. We can come to God face to face. He is wanting a personal relationship with all of you guys. I'm going to talk to the men just for now, but sometimes, does it feel hard to open up? Is that just me? It's hard to be vulnerable sometimes. Maybe not just for guys. But we need to just get past the wall that's blocking us from receiving God, from being intimate with him. And I think of our hearts kind of like, I don't know if you guys seen a potter or, a potter make pottery or vases. They start with this lump of clay that's like very hard, right? And you can't really move it around. But once they add water and the wheel is spinning, they're going for it and it's forming and it's moving and shaping and molding. And that's how I want my heart to be. When I come to God, I want my heart to be vulnerable. I want it to be softened so God can shape me into his image and in his ways. And I pray that for all of you guys too, that the barriers won't be there, that he will come to you in a very personal way that speaks to you because he wants to love you and show who he is to you. So as I pray and the band begins to play, the altar is open. If you feel like you've been blocked off and like you're hiding things from God and not wanting to reveal your true self to him, today's the day to just talk to him. Just let it out. If you're grieving, if you're anxious, bring that today. Bring that to Jesus. He's calling you. Thank you, Jesus, for this day. Thank you for this community. Thank you for this church. Thank you that you are not a God who is far off and looking down on us and wanting to condemn us for sins we've done and things that we're not proud of, but you're a God looking to redeem and restore and give us life and hope. I thank you for every person that is here today. I pray that you continue to soften their hearts, that if they're dealing with pain or struggle or anything that they don't know how to put the words to, that you will meet them where they are, that you will comfort them in their grief, that you can give them freedom. I thank you that you give us freedom, Lord. We don't have to be bound and shackled. Lord, I pray that you continue to shape our hearts to align every desire and every feeling that we have with who you are, that you continue to change our hearts, Lord. I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.